Whether you agree or disagree, or it just simply goes over your head, you can still quote me, because that's what I said.
Hey, how you guys doing today? Welcome to another episode of Native Talks. Now, if you did not hear it from these two lips, then you've been lied to and you've been tricked. Because before you can repeat it or even start to debate it, you just better make sure that you heard me say it. All right. All right, guys, today's topic, I'm going to kind of dive into my educational background. Now, I got to give you a heads up straight up. My educational background is not steep like a lot of people. Um, I'll get into how I felt from the time I was a little kid up until, I went away to college and just kind of give you an idea of what kind of person I was when it came to school, some of the experiences that I had. Um, but don't be looking for nothing deep and serious and all into the educational waters, because that's not what my educational career was like. Okay. So basically the topic of this video is not very studious, but never dubious. And that kind of describes the way my whole mentality was about school. I wasn't a very studious kid, but I was never dubious. I was never the type that, was getting into trouble in school. I wasn't the skipping class type. You know, I just, school had its place for me, but it just didn't fulfill everything that I wanted. So let's start from the very beginning, as far back as I can remember, and as far back as what my mother had described to me about, the beginnings of my education. First of all, my mother used to read to me all the time when I was a kid. Um, Believe it or not, we had a children's Bible, that my mom bought me and my brother when we were kids. And each story had pictures that went along with the story in the Bible. So that was really my first introduction to hearing words and trying to understand what they mean. Before that, I'm pretty sure any words I heard, I just responded to, but didn't try to figure out. And I think that's little kids, when you first start hearing adults say stuff to you, it's words that you just respond to. You learn what they mean because your parents, make the meaning aware to you. But when they start reading stories to you and you start reading about characters and different people and things of that nature, that gets your brain working. And you start trying to picture the characters that they're describing, and you try to understand what the character or the person thinks. That's how you start to individualize your learning level. And my mother reading out of the Bible to us, and then eventually she would have us read back. The more we learned, excuse me, the more we learned how to express those words and started learning what they meant. Then we were able to read little sentences and read them back to our mother. So that back and forth that she raised me and my brother on, that really helped me to want to learn more and want to read more. Reading was already embedded in me before I even started preschool. The preschool that I attended, I know it was called Head Start, but I can't remember if it had another name with it. Now, I found out years later. I didn't know it. I didn't know it at the time. And for many years, I didn't know it because I didn't really ask. But the school that my mother had me in was a Montessori school. And I'm not going to get into what Montessori means. If you want to know what that is, you're going to have to Google that and look that up. I'm not going to get into that. But it apparently was a form of schooling that my mother was unaware that they taught at the time. And when my mother made it clear that after I had attended Head Start at this Montessori school and she found out it was a Montessori school, she took me and my brother out because it totally went against her Christian faith. But at the time, she didn't know that it was a Montessori school. She just thought it was a Head Start program, to prepare children to enter, into kindergarten. So I do remember that I had a teacher, but I can't, it's really funny. I remember what the lady looked like, but I cannot remember her name for nothing in the world, but I remember what she looked like. But I remember going into the class. I remember what the room looked like. It was in the basement of this Montessori church. And I remember the kids, some of the kids that were in that Head Start school wound up being kids that I graduated high school with. So that was the breeding ground of a lot of people that I know. Right to this very day, we had went to Head Start together. I remember I didn't have a problem with the school at that time. I made friends. I had my first crush on the first boy that I liked. His name was Andy, and I had a crush on him. I remember I never had any fights with anybody, but there was a girl that I didn't like. I'm not going to say her name, but I didn't like her. She was mean. She was a mean little girl. And I just remember not liking her. I never got into any fights with her. I never had any issues with her, but I remember them teaching us, just the basics. The ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, sharing was a huge thing where you were taught to share, your toys at playtime. I remember the school picture that we took because my mother had it in a frame and she used to keep it on our coffee table at home. And I remember it was a black and white picture. I think I was in the fourth row. There were 5 rows of kids and I was in the 4th row. I remember the sun, because one thing about me to this very day, I don't like the sun in my eyes, and my face usually, kind of does one of these whenever the sun's in my eyes. And so I remember in that picture that the sun was in my eyes and my face was all scrunched up. I remember that picture. I don't know what happened to it. I know through the years that picture disappeared, but to this day, I can remember the picture and I remember what it looked like. And I remember that my mom had it. I do not remember kindergarten at all. I do not remember kindergarten. I remember 1st grade. But if you ask me about kindergarten, I can't remember it. I do know that in 1st grade, I was attending a elementary school called Quindaro Elementary School, and it was in Kansas City, Kansas, and it was a total African American school. I do not remember any white kids going to school there. Now, if there were some, I didn't see them. To me, it was a totally Black school. It was in a poor community, unfortunately. But I remember I had a Black teacher. Her name was Miss Massey. And I remember her because she reminded me, I remember when the Jeffersons used to come on TV. I remember Helen Willis. And I remember her dark skin and her beautiful hair. And Miss Massey, she favored Roxy Roker, who played Helen Willis on The Jefferson. She looked just like her. And so I remember her. But Miss Massey didn't play. She didn't play. She didn't tell. I was by the time I was in the first grade, I was a very talkative little girl, and Miss Massey didn't play that, and so she was always checking me for talking. She was the first teacher who punished me in front of the class for talking. And this was back during the time when you had permission from parents. It was not a bad thing for a teacher to spank a child. And I remember I got spanked for the first time in front of my entire class by Miss Massey. And then I got a spanking at home because Miss Massey called my mom, told my mom what I did, and I got in trouble. But I noticed that even by first grade, when it came to reading and writing, I was very good at that. I excelled in that. I seemed to do better than a lot of other children in the class when it came to reading and writing. But when it came to math, oh, I sucked at math. And I knew that about myself in the first grade. Just numbers and me, we did not vibe. We did not get along. I hated math and math hated me. By the time I got to second grade, I enjoyed school, but I had switched schools. Would I have wanted to stay at Quindaro? No. I thought that I wanted to because I was being moved from the only school that I knew to attend another school. Now it was how can I put it? It was in the same district. So it was a poor, impoverished district, but it was a different area where I would have been living around different people. I would have had none of the friends that I made at Quindaro. I would have had to make all new friends. So that made me nervous. But when I joined this school, when I entered this school, my teacher was Miss Thistlethwaite in the second grade, and she was the first lesbian that I had ever been exposed to. Now, I may have seen lesbians before when I was a little kid, but I didn't know what a lesbian was. Miss Thistlethwaite was the first lesbian that I saw that I knew something was different about her than any other woman that I had ever seen. You know, that was the first time that I seen a woman wear her hair short. That was the first time that I seen a woman wearing men's clothes. That was the first time I seen a woman who didn't wear makeup, because all the women, my mother didn't wear makeup, but my mother wore earrings and bracelets and necklaces and dresses. And I never saw Miss Thistlethwaite wear any of that stuff. She wore men's clothes. She wore sandals. She wore sneakers. I never saw that woman wear an earring. I never saw her wear anything. I mean, honestly, if you did not hear her say that my name is Miss Thistlethwaite and you heard her voice and her voice sounded feminine, you did not know that she was a woman if she had not have heard her talk. She also, she binded her breast. You knew there was some breast there, but as a little kid, you weren't really looking at that area. But everything about her just said man. So I remember she was the first lesbian that I was introduced to, but she was one of the most patient teachers I had. She knew I was not good at math, and she never made me feel bad about not doing well in math. Now, she didn't really do much to make it stronger or like help me get better at it, but she never made me feel bad about it. When I got to the third grade, that was Ms. Regier, who was an old lady. She reminded me of Nancy Reagan. If there was any teacher that looked like Nancy Reagan, Miss Regier looked like her. Little shriveled up old lady, but she was so nice. I don't remember her doing anything much to strengthen my strengths or belittle me for my weaknesses either. But Miss Carter, when I got to fourth grade, I think that Miss Carter was the first teacher. She was a black lady. I don't know how old she was, but she was a young black lady. And I remember her most of all for several things. Number one, she always had her hair in an afro. I do remember that. That was the style during that time, was the afro. And her afro used to always look so pretty. And we would go outside for recess. The sun would shine on her hair. And one of the hairsprays that they had back then was called Afro Sheen. And she used to keep a can of Afro Sheen on her desk. And when she was going outside, she would spray the Afro Sheen on her hair. And when she'd go outside, that sun would shine on her fro and it would just look like it was twinkling. It would look so pretty. I remember that about her hair. I remember that she picked up on. She was the first teacher that noticed my ability in spelling and writing and reading. She used to encourage me to do good in my reading and my writing and my spelling. I would win spelling bees. I never went into like true spelling bee competitions, but she would have little mock spelling bees in the class, and I excelled in that. I was really good at that. But whenever she put me up in front of that, she was also the one that would expose me in front of the class with what I couldn't do, and that was math. And oh God, the blackboard. She was the teacher, unfortunately. She was the teacher that made me never want to get up in front of a blackboard to do a math problem ever again. She made me feel so stupid because she would put me up there in front of everybody in the class, and anybody who's been in that position, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That is one of the most embarrassing situations when you get up there on that blackboard and you don't know what you're doing and the whole class eyes is on you. She made me hate blackboard moments. I appreciated her for her encouraging me with writing and spelling and everything, but I about almost hated her every time she made me go up to that chalkboard to do a math problem. um, Also, in the fourth grade, that's when I started doing a lot of, they started having a lot of field trips. And Miss Carter's class went on a lot of field trips. And my mother started getting heavily involved in my school when, I was in the fourth grade. Fifth grade was, oh gosh, I can't remember what that old lady's name was. I can't remember her name, but she was an old lady with brown hair and she wore glasses. And no, I take that back. Fifth grade was Miss Holmes. I forgot about that. Miss Holmes was fifth grade. And Miss Holmes was an overweight white lady. She had salt and pepper hair, but she was overweight. And I knew where she lived. I found out where she lived at. Don't ask me how I found out. I can't even remember how I found out. But to this day, I know the street that her house was on, and we used to drive by it all the time. I think my mother found out where it was. But Miss Holmes was the first teacher who she was the first teacher. I called her a bribe teacher. She was the first teacher that would bribe you to do what she wanted. Case in point, my generation, if anybody cared to know, my generation was the generation where rap started. My generation was the beginning of the rap era. And I remember the first day we got exposed to rap music, and it was through Miss Holmes's class. We had this boy in our class named Corey who was always clowning around. He was always telling jokes, pulling pranks on people, and sometimes he would really act up in class. And Miss Holmes, she didn't quite know how to deal with Corey. I remember one time he bit a battery. He just picked up a battery that he saw laying on something in the classroom, and he just picked up this battery. And it's the little batteries that you put in, your Walkman or something like that. And he bit into it and got battery acid on his tongue. I remember Miss Holmes rushed him out of the room, and they had to give him milk and stuff. And he he was always causing problems. I'll just put it that way. And so one day he came to class, and he had this record that he brought with him. And y'all got to remember, this was not during the streaming, not the CD or cassette tape era. This was strictly record players. You had either the 45 or the 33 inch. And he had the 45-inch record, and it said Sugar Hill Gang. Well, us kids, we was in the Midwest. Now I know in New York, rap had already opened doors up there. A lot of rappers were coming into their own. So New York, they had rap probably 2-3 years before it got to the Midwest. Okay, so Midwest was always behind everybody else. And so none of us had heard of Sugar Hill Gang. And so he wanted to play this record that he had, but he was acting up in class. And so Miss Holmes, I remember her, if she wanted you to sit down and be quiet and do what she wanted you to do, she would make deals with you and make wagers with you and say, well, if you do this, I'll let you do that. No other teacher up until her did that. Most of the time, teachers will say, this is the way it is. You're going to do it that way, or you're not going to do it at all. But Miss Holmes was the teacher that would try to negotiate. And I remember her negotiating with Corey, saying, if you sit down, do your work and everything, at free time, I'll let you listen to your record. And you could have seen a halo come up on that boy's head, knowing that if he act good, he get to play his record. So he was acting just perfect. So when free time came, they put the record on, and I remember all of us standing around this record, and we're hearing a hip hop, a hippity 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 hop. You don't stop the rockin' to the bang bang boogie, just up jump the boogie to the rhythm of the boogity beat. And all of us kids was like, whoa. Because we had never heard, when we heard hotel, motel, Holiday Inn, they say, if your girl starts acting up, then you take her friend. I mean, all of us was like, we had never heard anything like that. And we started dancing and everything. And I know Miss Holmes kind of stood there and was looking at all these kids. And I mean, what was funny about it is we had white kids at this school. There were white kids that attended school. So the white kids and the black kids, we all just dancing to this music. And Miss Holmes, who I'm pretty sure probably during her young years was probably during the Gershwin, that era, and here she's listening to this hip hop, the beginning of something called rap. And she just had this look on her face like, what are they listening to? So she was the negotiator type teacher. But she never nurtured my strengths, and she never made me feel bad about my weaknesses. Mrs. Stout was my 6th grade teacher. And she is by far one of my favorite teachers of all time. Miss Carter was also another favorite teacher of mine, but Miss Stout kind of beat her out because Miss Stout would have us write stories. She was the first teacher that had us write a story. She would, give us something, give us a subject to write about, and then we would have to write about it, and then she would grade, what we wrote. And she was the first teacher that saw something that I wrote and told me that she liked it. Up until then, my mother was the only one who had ever said that she liked something that I wrote. So to hear someone outside of my family read something that I wrote and say that they liked it, plus she encouraged me, I was still excelling at my reading and my writing and my spelling. So Miss Stout was very influential in encouraging me. Now, the blackboard situation still happened. That happened in every grade. But by the time I was in the sixth grade, I was over the blackboard. I already knew that when it came to math, I just was not good. By sixth grade, I knew this I can't do this. You know, I I just knew it's not me. I'm not good at math. I can't do it. And I had a mentality about it. By the time I was in sixth grade, I hated math. I hated it because of the way it made me feel, because I could not do it, because I could not conquer it. And I was constantly put in a position where I had to face that challenge in front of a whole classroom. If I had been able to face the challenge privately at my desk where nobody knows I'm struggling and I'm just leaned over trying to figure out how to work it out, probably wouldn't have had such an animosity towards math. But because I was put in a position where I had to try to figure it out with all eyes on me, and, let's face it, I wasn't the most popular kid in school. I was a quirky kid. So sometimes people use the fact that I'm up there struggling, trying to figure out a math problem, and I'm getting the problem wrong and got to erase it and start again. Then I hear the sniggles and the giggles going on behind my back. Now, everybody, all eyes is on me. They watching me. But then I got to hear the laughter on top of it. So by the time I was in sixth grade, after dealing with that kind of situation all through my elementary school years, by the time I was in sixth grade, I was over math and I hated it. Going into the seventh grade, now my generation also represents the ending of an era. And what I mean by that was when I went into seventh grade, that was the year that the state of Kansas, I can't speak for other states, I can only speak for Kansas. That was the first time the state of Kansas shifted from junior high school to middle school. And what they did was they took sixth grade, which at the time I was in sixth grade was still in elementary school. But when they decided to get rid of junior high, which junior high was seventh and eighth grade, that was it. You only did 2 grades in junior high, seventh and eighth, and then ninth grade you went on to high school. Kansas adopted this, well, we're not going to do junior high anymore. We're going to call it middle school. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the sixth grade out of elementary and we're going to put the sixth grade in middle school. So now you had sixth, seventh, and eighth in middle school, and then you go to high school. That's what Kansas did. Now, other states may have already implemented that. As I've stated before, Midwest is slow. It takes them a while to catch up with what everyone else is doing. So, but to me, the fact that my generation was the last generation that had the sixth grade being in elementary school, when I went away to seventh grade, honestly, I think adding sixth grade to seventh grade, or shall I say making the middle school transition, I think was a big mistake. Because for me, going from sixth grade to seventh grade was hard enough. Making the adjustment of going to being in one class with one teacher, and any homework that you had came from that teacher and that teacher alone, to now all of a sudden you go to this school where you got 6 teachers, 6 different classes, 6 different subjects, and everyone has their own homework assignments, and you're trying to figure out how to get them all done by the time they're due and not neglect other classes in the process. You're trying to show each class the same amount of time and effort and stuff. And that was so hard for me. And I think if I had done that, if I had went from fifth grade and had to go directly into that, that would have just, I don't think I would have been emotionally mature enough to deal with that. That extra year that you get in the sixth grade, I feel prepares you. I if it was hard on me going from sixth to seventh, imagine how it is for someone going from fifth to sixth and they have to deal with that. I think we've seen a decline in kids being able to adjust in middle school simply because they're being forced to do it too soon. That's what I think. That's just my personal opinion. Other people may disagree, but I think it was a mistake because in the state that I was going to school in, the educational levels and excellence that a lot of schools were doing before they did that transition declined after the transition. And so you gotta, whenever your schools were doing real good, and then you do this big transition like this, and all of a sudden you start seeing the decline in the educational program, then you have to kind of go back and say, what did we do wrong? And I think our state didn't do that. They just let it keep going the way it's going. And it's been going that way for years. But steadily, year after year, it's still declining. So you have to kind of ask yourself, I mean, did you change something that is having eternal repercussions? And when I say eternal, I know it ain't everlasting, but I'm just saying we created a situation that now, if we tried to reverse it, it wouldn't make a difference. I just think it was too soon to expose children that young to multiple classrooms and multiple teachers. It's just too much. It's just too much. They should have left it the way it was, but that's just my personal opinion. So I struggled. By eighth grade, I did not like school. And it was mainly because I was trying to juggle all of these classes and deal with all of these different teachers. And each teacher had their own personality, their own style, their own way of doing things. I had went from teachers who would stay on you and make sure that you did your work to where when you went to middle school, if you didn't turn something in, teacher didn't say nothing. But yet you'd get a pink slip when it was time for pink slips to come out. You know, you would during parent teacher conferences, you would start hearing, oh, she didn't turn this in or she didn't turn that in. And you sitting there going, but you didn't tell me. And it was something that when you're in elementary school, you're used to a teacher staying on you and saying, you need to get this done, you need to get it done. And then you had your parents getting on you saying, get it done, get it done. But when you went to middle school, you didn't have anybody really doing that. They weren't enforcing it. I get it. I understand now as an adult what they were doing. They were preparing you to have the unction and the motivation to do it yourself and not have someone constantly looking over you, preparing you for eventually what adult life was going to be. But again, I think it was too soon. The way they had the system set up first, was just let it happen as you go from each situation. But to try to transition people sooner than they're ready to be transitioned, I think that has bit them in the behind for so many years. But it's a bite that they won't take credit for. But anyway, so like I said, by eighth grade, I hated school. I didn't like it. I loved writing. I loved reading. I loved spelling. I also added history as one of my favorite subjects because I loved learning about the history of places, the history of people and cultures. That really sparked a lot in me. I did not like science because science involved math. And whenever you're talking about math, if math is involved in anything, I'm not going to like it. If I've got to sit there and try to subtract, multiply, add, divide, anything, we're going to have a problem because I hated math. So science had a lot to do with math and things of that nature. And and because I was still struggling with trying to get my life around all these different classes and assignments that you had to do. And then on top of that, boys were something that I started paying attention to, but they weren't paying attention to me. And I'm standing on the sidelines watching all these girls that are so-called pretty getting all the attention. And like I said, I was a skinny, quirky girl, in middle school. So no one was looking at me. No one was talking to me. So it was a hard time for me. Hard doesn't quite describe it, but that's the only word that I can think of right now. It just was not a good time. By eighth grade, I did not like school at all. And I did start kind of acting out in my own way. Plus my father, his visits with me kind of dwindled a lot the older I got. He probably visited more when I was little, but as I got older, I noticed that the visits were kind of waning and he wasn't coming around as much. And so I was bitter about that. So you add that on top of me just not liking school at all. My mother, I have to give her a lot of credit because she hung in there with me and she never stopped working with me and trying to understand what I was going through and, giving me discipline, but not being overly harsh, but still not letting me get away with things, but she was very patient with me during that time. And I wasn't necessarily the easiest, little kid to deal with at that time. I remember I wasn't the type that skipped school. I never left the school building and skipped, school, but I did skip a class once. And it was a math class. I was not good at math. And I remember the day I decided that I just wasn't going to go to that class. I just couldn't take it anymore. Sitting in there, hearing all these numbers and equations and stuff, and being put in yet another moment that I knew that I didn't know what I was doing. I just decided I'm not going to class. And so what I did was I actually went because I hate to say it, but there were certain areas of the school that I attended where you could go and no one knew you were there. And at that time, when I was growing up, you didn't have, security walking around the schools. You didn't have that. There was no need for that. I didn't see security in schools till I got to high school. Middle school didn't have security walking the hall. So the stairwell was one of the places that you could hide out, and the bathroom. In any bathroom on any level of the school building, you could go in the bathroom and just hang out in the stall and just kind of sit there, but you better be in the stall. Don't be just standing around in the bathroom because teachers could walk in there at any time. But if you sat on the toilet with your feet up, and that was easy to do, just sit there. I didn't go in the bathroom and do that. I actually hung out in the stairwell because I knew teachers weren't going to climb the stairwell. Teachers walked the halls, but they didn't go in the stairwells because that meant walking upstairs, and teachers didn't do that. So you could pretty much hang out. I know that when I skipped that class, there was kids that was out there with us, with me. There was a couple of couples, boys and girls that were making out in the stairwell. You couldn't smoke. And believe it or not, there were some kids that did smoke, but they, you couldn't smoke because you set the smoke alarms off in the school. So, but there were a lot of people that hung out in the stairwells. Um, but unfortunately, I see when you're not the kind of kid that does those dirty, underhanded things all the time, you show your ignorance. And my ignorance was is I actually thought I could skip that class and my mother would know. I forgot that they take attendance when you when you come into class. You have to raise your hand or say here, and I wasn't there. And so I was listed as not attending the class. They called my mother and told my mother, your daughter was here, for her other classes, but when it came to this class, she was not in class. So when I got home, my mother questioned me about where I was. And when I told her that I didn't go to class, and she goes, where did you go? And I said, I was in the stairwell. I got a whooping. My mother whooped me. So I knew that even though I hated, see, and that's what I'm saying, my mother didn't play. She made it clear. I even explained to her because she asked me why I, didn't go to class, and I told her, I don't like math class, and they make me feel stupid, and they laugh at me when I get the answer wrong. And I mean, I tried everything to get my mom to see it from where I was coming from, and even though she understood it because she had problems with math too when she was in school. She said, I understand. She said, but that don't give you an excuse to skip class. She said, what you did was wrong, and I'm going to have to punish you. And she whooped me for that. So I learned that even though I didn't like the class, even though I really didn't want to be there, my mother gave me no choice. I have to go to class. So even though I was in class, up here, I checked out. Because the one thing I said is, I can't do this. I'm not good at math. And I'm not gonna sit in this class and act like I can do it when I know deep down I can't. So even though I was in class, I totally tuned the teacher out, wasn't listening to nothing they said. And I was in class every day, but I got a D in that class. I passed by the skin of the teeth. And I think the only reason that I actually passed that class was because I turned all my assignments in. Assignments may have been wrong as rain, probably didn't get none of the answers right, but the fact that I turned in the work worked on my behalf, and I barely passed because I got a D. But going into high school, I have to admit, I was not looking forward to high school at all, because I was basically saying to myself, if I'm going to have to deal with more math, if I'm going to have to deal with now people continuing to know that I'm not good at math, and when is this going to end? I mean, at that point, when by the time I got to ninth grade, I was ready for school to end. I was really tired of going. And it was because I was tired of struggling in subjects that I could not do. And it was like all of the subjects that I was doing good in, they didn't overshadow what I couldn't do. What I couldn't do was overshadowing what I could, and that bothered me. That bothered me so much, and that's what made me hate going to school. Plus, again, I was a quirky girl, and even though I wasn't as skinny as I was, I was, developed, breasts were starting to come through, hips were starting to come through, but I wasn't curvaceous like a lot of the other girls in school. My mother didn't have money to buy me all the fancy clothes, so I may have came to school in clothes that was plain Jane at the time, till I let my quirkiness come to life. I was trying so hard the first 2 years of high school to just fit in. I was trying to be what everybody was saying was cool, what everybody was saying was the in thing. I tried to fit in. I tried to dress like everybody else. I tried to talk like everybody else. I tried to put on my makeup and fix my hair a certain way to try to get the boys to look at. Nothing worked. Nothing worked. The first 2 years of high school, I was I was I was drowning. But one of the things that did help my first year in high school was that I was going to a school that I think had I stayed there, I would have done better at, because the school that I was attending when I went to ninth grade, I went to my mother's alma mater. It was the school that my mother graduated from. So I was honored. I really was excited to go to a school that she had been at. Her and my aunties and my uncles had all attended this school. So I kind of felt like it was a tradition, to be able to graduate and go to the school that they went to. And while I was there, because it was a school in a poor community, that meant everybody that went there was broke. All the kids that went there came from broken homes, single parent homes. A lot of us was broke, didn't have no money, so you didn't really see a lot of kids wearing too many fancy outfits. All of us were trying to make it in what we had. And even though I did not like math, hated math, I didn't like the subjects that I was struggling in, what made up for it for me was the fact that I had friends who lived in the same neighborhood as me. I We all were broke, so there was no need to try to outdo somebody else. Um, even had a boy that liked me, and he asked me to be his girlfriend, and I was a girlfriend. I mean, I had a boy that liked me, genuinely liked me. He wasn't look. Now, I'm not saying that he didn't look at the pretty girls, because all dudes look. You know how they are. They all look, but he liked me. And he asked me to be his girlfriend. So you add that plus all the friends that I had, the bad moments that I had in class that I wasn't struggling with was starting to even out, because I was finding a way to find good reasons about being at school. Plus, my writing really started to take off. I had written some stories, I was writing poems, and some of my teachers had been exposed to some of the stuff I wrote, and I was being encouraged to keep writing. So I was starting to say, okay, well, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can navigate. Well, that all came crashing down. Probably I had been about 10 months into going to this school, and then I find out we're moving. And that because we're moving, I'm going to be going to a different school. So, probably 2 weeks before school was let out, I knew that I was going to be starting a new year at another school. And I was so heartbroken, because I was leaving all my friends. I was leaving because even though my grades were not brainiac grades, where I'm just making straight A's, I was actually making decent grades. I was actually making, C's and B's in a lot of my classes, which that was the first time in my whole educational career from that point on. That was the only time I was making B's and C's. So I was feeling really good and comfortable where I was. And then my mom hits me with, we're moving. And so that following year, 10th grade, I transferred to Schlegel High School. And I got to be honest, I didn't like it when I first got there. Schlegel had to grow on me. because Schlegel was the total opposite of the school that I left. This school, Schlegel, was in a more upscale neighborhood. It wasn't too upscale because it was still in the impoverished district, but the school was in an area where blacks were living better. A lot of them were homeowners, whereas the other school was in a community where a lot of people were renting, a lot of people were, on welfare and struggling in, low paying jobs. You get out to Schlegel, a lot of parents out there making some pretty decent money. A lot of the black kids who were attending Schlegel were like me. We were all getting bused from our neighborhood to Schlegel. Whereas when I went to the other school, my mom could drive me to school because the school wasn't that far from where I lived. The kids could dress their behinds off. It was matter of fact, the school was known as a fashion plate. That's what they called it, a fashion plate, because everybody there was dressing real nice and everything. And for someone like me, whose mother was struggling, just to keep me in clothes, I found myself feeling like I did back when I was in the 8th grade. I did not like going to Schlegel. I did not like it. But when it was made clear that this was a school that I was going to wind up attending, that we were not moving anymore, that this was a school I was just going to have to attend, and there was no way I was going to get out of it, then I started making friends. Now, I never had a boyfriend at that school. All the boyfriends I had went to other schools. I never had a boyfriend at the school I was attending. I never had one at Schlegel. All my boyfriends were at other schools, which I'm kind of happy about that, because I think the boys at Schlegel at that time were very shallow. I mean, everything was about what a girl looked like. And I wanted a boy who just liked me for me. And I had that at my old school, but you get out to the fashion plate school. And of course, if I'm not looking like a black Barbie walking down the hall, you don't get noticed and you don't get picked. And so I just remember my attitude towards school began to revert. And it took my mother hanging in there with me and encouraging me that if I just get through this, then this part of my life will be over and I'll be an adult. And that's what she kept telling me. You're getting close to your adult life, to where you'll be able to decide what you want to do. If you just work through this, you'll be able to get there. And so that, her telling me that, kind of helped out. But I have to admit, by the time I got to my senior year, I just about had it. They had me in geometry, and I dropped out of geometry because I barely passed algebra, because I told you it's math. Anything with math, I was still struggling with. And when they had me signed up to take geometry, I got really scared at that point because I was really getting close to graduating high school and I was really getting scared. So I remember asking my mom, I'm like, if I have to take this class, I'm not going to graduate. I mean, I told my mother that. I was honest with her about it. I just told her, I'm like, look, I know what my strengths are. I know what my weaknesses are. If this is a required class that I have to take, I ain't going to graduate. And I want to graduate. And so my mom said, you need to talk to your counselor. She said, go to your school counselor and ask your school counselor if this is a requirement for you to graduate. And so I remember meeting with my counselor. I can't remember what her name was, but I do remember she was an overweight black lady light-skinned, and she had a lot of freckles on her face. And I remember asking her, is geometry a requirement for graduation? And she said, no. That's all I needed to hear. She said algebra, basic math, and algebra were a requirement, but geometry was not. It's just that if I was in algebra, the next step was to take geometry, but you did not have to take that to be required to graduate. So once I heard that, I told him, take me out of it. I don't want to. Get me out of it. I want to graduate. And I truly believe, had I not made that decision, I would not have graduated high school. One of the worst teachers that I ever had, and I'm going to tell this little part and then I'm going to kind of end it. I'll kind of tell you a little bit about college, but I won't go into deep detail. I will do another video that talks about my college experience because it is not very long, but the lessons that I learned warrant a whole nother video. So, but I will just kind of give you a cap so to just kind of let you know what will be coming ahead with that. When I finally got to my senior year and I was really deciding what I wanted to do in life, I had this teacher named Mrs. Fields, and she was a white lady with she had the straightest hair I've ever seen. She had straight platinum blonde hair. And she used to always wear it parted down the middle, and it was just straight. She had us write so many themes and stuff. She taught English. And she used to have us write a lot of themes and stories, and had us do journals and stuff like that. And everything I wrote, everything, whether it was a poem, whether it was a story, I don't care what it was, she always had something negative to say about what I wrote. She was so mean to me about my writings that she really had me questioning whether this was what I really wanted to do, because I knew I loved to write. I knew that I loved writing poetry. I knew I was good with reading and writing and spelling, and I loved to express my thoughts through, characters that I wrote about, stories that I would like to bring to life. And here this woman was bashing every single thing I did. And I remember deciding for the first time in my life, because up until then, I kind of let teachers kind of label me and kind of say what kind of student I was, and try to, label me as, well, she's this kind of student, she's that kind of student, she's good at this, and I would just take what they say. Miss Fields was so mean that she pushed me to decide that you're not going to take this away from me. I love to write. I believe I'm a good writer, and I don't care what you think. She was the first teacher that I didn't care what she thought about whether I was good enough or not. And I made up my mind that I was going to write. And to this day, I write. So I'm in the process of writing my first poetry book. I've been writing poetry for years. I've recited my poetry in church functions and events. I've even inspired younger people to tap into their, poetic side. If I had listened to Miss Fields, I never would have done that. And probably more than half the stuff I've written never would have been written if I had listened to her, if I had let her dictate who I knew I was on the inside. I graduated. I did struggle a little bit before graduation, but I did graduate. I did go away. I did 1 year of college at Oral Roberts University. And as I said, I only did 1 year. And the struggles I had there, and the lessons that I learned, like I said, that deserves a whole nother video that I will do. But I was never a brainiac. I was never what I call a smart person, but I believe I was just good at certain things. And when I hear about magnet schools that they have for kids now, I would have loved to attended a magnet school because it would have been classes that were centered on building up my strengths, not constantly making me face my weaknesses and trying to make me think that I could conquer something that I know I couldn't conquer. Math just was not me. And no matter how many times they sat me in front of math and tried to make me face it and tried to make me conquer it, I knew within myself, and I believe the teachers knew it too, but they just kept putting me in front of it. I would have loved to have been at a magnet school where they find out what your strength is, what your gift is, and they help you build that. And that's where your concentration is. It ain't on the other stuff that you can't do, it's on what you can do. Kids who are in magnet schools now are truly, truly blessed because we didn't have anything like that when I was growing up. And I wish they had. I'm going to end this video here. I will come back and talk about my experience at Oral Roberts University. I will also come back and do many more videos. Thank you so much for walking down my educational memory lane. I may not have been the best student, but I believe I was the student I was meant to be. I've learned a lot. And a lot of what I learned, a lot of teachers have inspired me through the years, but Miss Stout will always be my favorite teacher of all time because she saw my gift, she saw my talent, and she encouraged me. And Mrs. Fields, even though I will always be angry at that woman for what she put me through, I thank her for pushing me to the point where I wouldn't let her take writing away from me as my first love and as my gift. She made me so mad that I decided I didn't care what she thought about me. So I thank her for that. If that was what she was hoping to get out of me, it worked. If that's not what she was hoping to get out of me, I kind of want to stick my tongue out at her and say, because I did it anyway. I became successful. No matter how you tried to beat me down, no matter how you tried to make me feel, I became a successful African-American woman who writes. I wish I could see that woman now, but I don't even know if she's still alive. So with that being said, I thank you for going back down memory lane with me. Please be on the lookout for my other upcoming videos that I'm going to do, but also check out the ones that I've done before. And until the next time, see ya.
If you like my vibe, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Till the next time, see ya.